tonight's mostly going to be stars, clusters, Gemini, and further south, culminating. Perhaps we'll get as far south as northern Orion. Here's the view of M42, a 64 flood, 36 decibels, and I'll be using those settings at least initially for the evening. It's nice to get back out here. Weather has been inconsistent, the moon has been present, but here's our view to begin with. Okay, given the fact that I'm about to lose what I'm about to observe, which are farther north NGCs and other studies in Auriga, NGC 2281, so I've come out a little bit earlier. So I've got the scope trained on NGC 2281, an open cluster in Auriga. Magnitude 5.4, 15 arc minutes in size, some 30 stars with the brightest of magnitude 7.3. The cluster is located 1,800 light years distance. Keep in mind it's not quite sky dark, but here is the view that I'm getting through the scope right now, and I will soon lose this study to the observatory roof try. So here's the view of the cluster, with some condensation towards the center here. Probably the progenitor stars. It's probably a fairly young cluster, but fairly dispersed. And it's on the far side of the galaxy from the center of the Milky Way, as most things in Auriga are, since it may be very close to the antipode. Let's move on. Our next early night sky wonder is a globular cluster in Lynx. NGC 2419, magnitude 10.4, 6.2 arc minutes in size, magnitude 17.3 is the brightest star. Wow, this baby is very distant, 268,000 light years. This may in fact be that intrepid cluster. It's called the Intergalactic Wanderer. You can see it right there. I've always marveled at this particular cluster, given the fact that it's way outside the bounds of the Milky Way galaxy. It's moving between galaxies. I do believe that it is going to enter into our own galaxy, but I have to confirm that at some point in the distant future. Wow, this is great. Now, I have seen this barely through the 6-inch scope at the eyepiece under really good conditions. I'm very impressed with the view we're getting, and we're not even actually pushing the sensitivity of the REM2 system at this point. Take a moment and inhale that beauty. Coming to a galaxy near you. We now have NGC 2420, open cluster in Gemini, not too much of a trip from 2419, the globular cluster. Magnitude 8.3, some 10 arc minutes in size. A number of stars in it, 100, the brightest of magnitude 11.1, 8,100 light years distant. Yes, that is a beauty. Look at the concentration of stars towards the core. Wow. The brightest stars are bright enough for even a 3-inch scope to pick up. I'm sure that the hints of the cluster would be seen at the eyepiece of a 3-inch. Very. Now that is a beauty. A little more diversity again tonight. We're going to have a planetary nebula in Gemini, NGC 2392, magnitude 8.6, 47 by 43 arc seconds. So it should be quite resolvable. Magnitude 10.6 central star at a distance of 4,100 light years. Now I'm not seeing the central star. I'd probably have to back out on the exposure. I don't want to take the time to do that tonight. My battery will run low, but there's our planetary nebula right in just above the dark contrast bar. Pretty rich in nebulosity. Must be a fairly active planetary nebula with that regard, throwing out lots of ionized particles. But there's our view. For a little more diversity, there is actually a galaxy visible in the bounds of Gemini, NGC 2393. Magnitude 14, a little over an arc minute, 1.2 by 0.8 arc minutes. This is a spiral galaxy, some 1 million light years distant. Must be a fairly large spiral. I'm not sure if we're going to see it or not. I did not configure the scope for galaxies, but I am seeing something on the screen right about there, and the alignment's pretty good tonight. So yeah, we are seeing that 14th magnitude galaxy. And we are using parameters that are not specifically set up for galactic viewing. But I do like the way the stars look, and I like the fact they don't go comatose as I move around a little bit because the exposure time's been reduced. As I say, we're getting about an 8 to 10 inch view of this galaxy, magnitude 14. On to another open cluster in Gemini, NGC 2395, magnitude 8, some 12 arc minutes in size, pretty sparsely populated at 30 stars with the brightest at magnitude 10, 1700 light years distant, but the fact that this is a cluster is quite evident. Sweet. And the stars look so nice at these lower exposure time settings. And we actually picked out a 14th magnitude galaxy. I am impressed. Temperature is not quite as cold as it usually is, so I'd say probably down to about 30 degrees. It got very warm today, up in the 50s. And the skies look nice with minimal amount of chemtrails visible. And cloudification at a minimum. We're getting pretty good transparency. Some more variety. NGC 2261 is a nebula in Monoceros. 2 by 1 arc minutes. E by R. I'm not sure what that relates to. I have to investigate it. 2,500 light years distant. And here is our view from the nebulosity. Well, it looks comatose, doesn't it? Look at that bright star at its point, and it spreads out funnel-like on the left-hand side of the screen. NGC 2261. Well, this ought to be fun. An adventitious discovery just by pressing the next button. NGC 2262 is an open cluster in Monoceros. Faint, magnitude 11.3, 3.5 arc minutes, 35 stars, 11,700 light years distant. Let's see if we can pick it out. Doesn't tell me what the brightest star is. But if I had to see it, guess there was a cluster here, it would be right in this location here. Yeah. And at 11 magnitude 11, usually the brightest stars are about 3 magnitudes fainter, which means about 14th magnitude stars. And I would guess that's pretty much what we are seeing there. A nice find. Thank you, Dreyer. Well, after having a fine home-cooked meal, courtesy Vanessa, and watching half an episode of Jane the Virgin, who's no longer a virgin, by the way, I've now moved back outside to NGC 2263, a galaxy in Canis Majoris, magnitude 12.1, fairly large, 2.7 by 1.6 arc minutes, 122 million light years distant, and I think I can make out the galaxy. Right about there. It looks like only about the core, but I'm now on the awkward side of the telescope, so being able to pick things out is a little bit challenging. Not much of this galaxy is showing. 12.1, it should be more present, although I can see spiral extensions even from where I'm sitting, as well as the core of the galaxy. May look better in the camera, however. I'll see you in the morning. And you see 2263. Through the catalog here on the Gemini 2, NGC 2264 is a nebula plus open cluster in Monoceros, magnitude 3.9, 20 arc minutes with 40 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 5. Wow. 2,300 light years distant, and you can see that brilliant progenitor star right there. Wow. Pretty sparsely populated cluster, spreads out across the screen, pretty much left to right. There's our view. Open cluster in Gemini, magnitude 9.5, 7 arc minutes in size, 50 stars, the brightest is magnitude 11. Pretty distant, 11,100 light years. Wow. Magnitude 9.5. And here's the view. Nice, tight, open cluster. Very sweet. A star-rich field on the far side of the galaxy from the galactic core. Let's go ahead and take a look at that galaxy now. NGC 2267, a galaxy in Canis Majoris. Let it swing over. I'll turn off the camera. 2267, that promised galaxy in Canis Majoris. Pretty deep south study, magnitude 12.2, 1.7 by 1.3 arc minutes. It's a spiral, class B and O, whatever that means. Once again, I need to spend some time interpreting some of this symbology, these letter references. 69 million light years distant. And the camera put it in a very awkward position, but I think I'm seeing the galaxy right about this part of the screen here. I'll try to position it. We have a lot of studies to go through tonight, which means I'm not going to spend that much time on anything in particular, but I do believe we've turned up this galaxy. Although it's hard to tell from an extremely off-axis viewing angle. NGC 2271, a galaxy in Canis Majoris, magnitude 12.2, 2.1 by 1.4 arc minutes, a spiral OB class, 110 million light years distant. Nice view right here in the center of the screen. I'll position the camera once again. You can see it's kind of an oblate spiral. Nebulous core with some extensions going towards the top and the bottom of the screen, left and right. Very nice. NGC 2271. Here we have another galaxy, NGC 2272 in Canis Majoris, magnitude 11.7, larger, 2.4 by 1.6 arc minutes. 88 million light years distant. Also towards the south, minus 27 degrees. There's our galaxy right about there, and there's our highest contrast view of it. In keeping with the variety of studies we have this evening, NGC 2236 is an open cluster in Monoceros, magnitude 8.5. 7 arc minutes across, 50 stars, so it should be fairly compact. Magnitude 11, brightest star, 9,600 light years distant. And there's that fine cluster right there in the center of the screen. Now for another cluster, this one incorporates some nebulosity, so it's still a cluster in formation, Monoceros, NGC 2237, magnitude 5.5, fairly large, 80 by 60 arc minutes, 5,000 light years distant. Really dispersed. I can see some nebulosity right in this region here, tip of my finger. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that it's much of a cluster. You do see the nebulosity. NGC 2237. Here we have NGC 2240, an open cluster in Auriga, 1,500 light years distant. There's not a whole lot of information on this. Yeah, it looks like a fairly spread out open cluster. These are probably the main component stars. That may be a progenitor, I don't know. but looks like the cluster is mostly in this region. Although the size is not specified, so it's hard to tell. We have a study that's partially blocked slightly by the Roof Tries, NGC 2242, Planetary Nebula in Auriga. Faint, magnitude 14.5, 22 arc seconds with a central star of magnitude 17.6. This baby's distant, 19,500 light years, almost as far away from the core of the galaxy as we are from the core, but in the opposite direction. I'm not going to be able to identify an actual planetary nebula on the screen. That's a very small size. But if I had to guess, maybe in this region here, you'll have to tell for yourself. I'll sweep the screen a few times. Try to do it slowly. Planetary 2242. Okay, here we have a deep south study, NGC 2243, an open cluster in Canis Majoris. Discovered it by just progressing through the catalog, magnitude 9.4, 5 arc minutes, 100 stars, the brightest star of a magnitude 11.8. The reason why I selected this one is because of the density of stars, and boy, you can see them on the screen. It's beautiful. Wow. I'm raising my arm well above my head so that because this scope is in full tilt modality. I must have moved because we've lost the pixelarity of the stars on the screen. But you can see the cluster there just above the contrast bar. It gives a very nebulous appearance except for its brightest members. Good stars. On to NGC 2244, another step-through study, nebula and open cluster in Monoceros. Basically, it's also known as NGC 2239, magnitude 4.8, 24 arc minutes, the size of 100 stars. I suspect the nebulosity is 2244, 4,900 light years distant. Now, I'm not seeing much in the way of nebulosity here. Of course, I'm using a lower sensitivity setting, favoring clusters and stars. But anyway, here's our look. Here's another adventitious study by simply stepping through the catalog, NGC 2245, nebula in Monoceros. 2 arc minutes, pretty much face on 2 by 2, 2,500 light years distant. And yes, this one is quite visible and looks vaguely familiar to one I've shown earlier, and by stepping through the catalog I may have just stepped on the same nebulosity again, but keep in mind now it's darker now, and pretty much this nebula Monoceros is just past culminating. So there it is. We'll have to compare the views and the numbers later on when I begin to review this material on the morrow. Progressing to 2246, another nebula in Monoceros. This one is 80 by 60 arc minutes, 7,800 light years distant. And I'm not seeing anything here either. Although the screen is pretty much looking me in the face. Now, I will double check to make sure that 2246. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we're looking at. Yep, satellite. See, I'm not seeing as many as oh, wow. I was just about to say I'm not seeing that many satellites tonight, but we just had two of them pass within a couple of seconds of each other at right angles. North-south and an east-wester. NGC 2301, open cluster in Monoceros. Once again, magnitude 6, 12 arc minutes in size, some 80 stars. The brightest is magnitude 8, 2,800 light years distant. This one should be fairly condensed. And we can see that it is large, with a fair amount of condensation, making it an easily recognizable open cluster in the night sky. Another galaxy that's through step through on the NGC catalog, NGC 2303, in Auriga galaxy, magnitude 12.6, pretty much face on, 1.5 by 1.5. It's an elliptical. Those are usually fairly massive, well-matured galaxies that have used up most of their cold dark matter and star formation. 285 million light years distant. Sweeping the screen. I'm not getting a sense from my viewing angle if there's a galaxy on the screen. Ah, we got another satellite. I'll have to have a look at this later. I am not seeing the galaxy, however, from my viewing angle. Alright, well, there we go. NGC 2324 is an open cluster Monoceros. It was the last study on my list, original list for this night. Magnitude 8.4, 8 arc minutes, 70 stars. Brightest of magnitude 10.4. Quite distant, 12.4 thousand light years. And there it is. It is a fairly obvious cluster. Clusters actually do look better through an optimally sized telescope, so you don't have as many of the faint background stars. It gets a little tougher to see them as their unique individualities when there's so many bright stars on the screen in front of us. So if you get a star, a cluster, there's usually an optimum aperture for viewing it at, and I believe, if I can read my notes here, the optimum aperture on this one is something like a 12-inch scope. We started our observing evening with a view of Messier 42, the Great Nebula in Orion. Here is a nice Carpe Noctem final view, but black and white, of the Flame Nebula in Orion, NGC 2024, which is very close to one of the belt stars, Alnitak. And that is a very decent view for the settings I'm using. I do believe, I'll have to review my notes, but it's either going to be 64, I believe it's 128 flood with 36 sensitivity. But that is a very nice view of the flame, and in just the right position for this camera too. If I rotate the camera, you can see how much of a flame-like structure it has, and somewhere in there is the Horsehead Nebula. And with that, I am going to say, seize the night, Carpe.